Hello everyone. I would like to talk about the remake of Carrie. Yes, the remake of Carrie. No, not the Broadway one. No, not the TV movie, for there is one. It was written by Brian Fuller. No, not even the off-Broadway one, or the Riverdale episode it was squished into. I mean the 2013 remake of Carrie that was met by a resounding critical, "Oh. Alright. Why am I talking about a remake that is more than 10 years old? Because I made an algorithm-friendly video exactly one time, by accident, and I don't know how to follow that up, and this has been on my mind, so I'm gonna put it on yours. I mean, that's really my goal. I just want to talk about stuff I want to talk about. Let's just have some fun. Let's have some fun with it. There's a couple of things I want to get out of the way off the top. Just like admin stuff, basically. First of all, I am calling it a remake and not a new adaptation. Like, I know you could kind of call it either, and I know that the director went back to the novel and, like, some things were brought directly from the novel. Like, they changed one of the names back to what it was in the novel from what it was in the De Palma version. But there are also aspects directly taken from De Palma's movie and not from the novel. Carrie's dress, for one, and the conversation that she has about it. And that's why I'm calling it a remake. Also because it's faster to say. I also feel like I should make it clear right away that I'm not against remakes as a concept, not even remakes of classics. As a child of the 90s, I am honor bound to remember The Mummy starring Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz, which was a remake of a 1932 film of the same name that has exactly one redeeming feature, which is that Boris Karloff is in it and on screen sometimes. And that's coming from me. I fucking love the classic Universal monster movies. But when it comes to something that's iconic the way that Carrie is iconic...
Look, above the stage, look. She's not gonna do a Carrie.
Fuck-a-diddle-do. What's a Carrie? What does that mean?
You've never seen Carrie?
No? Oh, it's some phone call. Amazing.
A remake is kind of doomed from the beginning. Whether you do it extremely different or extremely the same, an in-the-know audience is always going to be comparing the film to the original. That's what I was doing, even though I actively tried not to. I didn't think it was bad exactly. It's just that anytime anything at all happened, whether it was the same or different, all I could think was, okay. In fact, sometimes I was thinking, I could just be watching the original right now. And I don't think that's a good sign. There are a couple of moments I actually liked a lot better in this one than the De Palma version, and one moment I thought was just awful. Stick around until the end and I'll tell you what those are. But on the whole, everything that makes this version not work in a way the original did comes down to agency, what it is, and how it is given to characters. The remake gave Carrie more agency than she had in the original, and bear with me because I know this is a weird take, I think that was the wrong choice for the narrative. Obviously, I'm in favour of female characters having agency, and if Carrie White were a real person, I would want her to make as many of her own choices as she possibly could. But as a character in a narrative, especially this narrative in particular, it makes sense for her to have as little space as possible in which to define herself as a person. Let me explain. First, what do I even mean by agency? It's easier to think of agency in fiction in terms of a character making choices or exerting power, but if it were enough to say choice or power, then I'd say that, but no. Agency, to borrow a definition from Currie, Kelly and Pomeranz, well, technically I'm borrowing it from Athena Bellis, who borrowed it from them, because that's academia, baby! Anyway, agency as a term doesn't just describe choices, it takes into account the circumstances under which those choices are made. Currie et al. Point out that the word choice tends to mask the circumstances under which people make decisions, while agency spotlights human actors and social forces simultaneously. Bellis expands on this by writing that the term agency is especially useful when thinking about media for especially teenage girl protagonists, as it allows for a way to read teen screen heroines as actively participating in the construction of girlhood within limits. So while a character might be navigating a patriarchal culture, they are capable of contesting the dominant power structures of that culture. Female characters and women broadly are typically denied agency, so of course I think it's important to give women, fictional or real, more agency. But I also think that when it comes to writing characters, you have to think about how that character's agency functions within a broader narrative. A character's agency comes from two places, the diegesis and whoever created that diegesis, whether that's a writer, director, whoever else might be in charge of what a character does and says. If a character is stuck in a room with one door and that door has a guard, then their agency is limited within the narrative, diegetically, by the guard who won't let them leave, and non-diegetically by the writer who decided that that room only has one door. It's a sign of a well-written character that they seem like they're making their own choices, not being guided by an author, but as a result, it can be easy to forget that fictional characters are just that, fictional. They're not really making their own decisions, they're making decisions that the writer has made for them. 1976 Carrie has very little control over her life, but she exerts agency when she can. What makes these moments important is how small they are, how little agency she can enact, and how much she is punished for it, and how all of that builds to the devastating conclusion. Carrie's agency has been limited by her mother, who abuses her teachers who either don't know what's happening or how to stop it, and her peers who think she's creepy and don't want to be around her. When Miss Collins and Sue Snell see how Carrie reacts to her first period, they start to think about her as a whole person, think about what made her the way she is. Miss Collins punishes the class for bullying and tries to encourage Carrie to come out of her shell. Sue has her boyfriend invite Carrie to the prom, sacrificing her own experience of a high school rite of passage to let Carrie have a good time for the first time in her life. Through this, Carrie starts to realize that her life is hers to live. She can make her own choices, even if they conflict with the ones her mother has made for her. In her disempowered position, there isn't much she can practically do, but she does whatever she can, beginning with the simple acknowledgement that she is a person. She goes to the library to research telekinesis, she experiments with wearing makeup, she goes to the prom even when her mother forbids it. These might be small things, but as I said, the fact that they are so small is the point. Carrie has been given so little space to understand herself as a person separate from her mother that going to the library and reading a non-fiction book is an honest-to-God rebellion. For the first time, she is starting to understand herself as her own person, which makes the prank all the more heartbreaking. This is the moment when she starts to wonder how much of that was real. Was she really thinking for herself, or just the butt of another joke? Her mother was right. They're all laughing at her. And if she was right about that, what else was she right about? Is Carrie sinful? Is this all her fault? As the audience, we know it's not, but she doesn't have the perspective we do. The remake sought to give its protagonist more agency. She stands up to her mother earlier in the film.
I'm not gonna say that. That's not even in the Bible. It doesn't say that anywhere.
Like the previous Carrie, she researches telekinesis, but she also experiments with it and learns to control it. The remake gives Carrie more agency, but in giving her more agency, it makes her actions less forgivable. Every problem in Carrie's life, both versions, is caused by her being denied knowledge about her body. Her mother thought that prayer and purity of thought would protect her from the curse of blood, but keeping Carrie in the dark is what turned her first period into a public spectacle. It's hinted that Carrie's telekinesis is inherited from her father in the original, from her maternal grandmother in the remake, but in both cases, this is more information that's been kept from her, so her full potential is another thing she only finds out about in the worst way possible. But in the remake, she kind of does already know what she can do, so doesn't that undermine the theme? The easiest way to demonstrate what I'm talking about is to compare the prom scenes of the original and the remake. In the original, Carrie is a deer in the headlights, but if that deer had the nuclear launch codes. In the 2013 version, she seems more in control, she has a better understanding of what she's capable of, and she's doing some of it on purpose. But if she can choose to use her power, she can choose not to use her power, so is this not just murder? There is a turning point in Chronicle, another film about a teenage outcast who develops telekinetic powers. The whole movie we've been following Andrew, who is bullied by his father and his classmates. He has a similar moment to Carrie where he thinks everything is looking up, and then it's all snatched away from him. The difference is that he retaliates on purpose and takes the time to justify it to himself.
This thing, right? It is called the apex predator. Right? And basically what this is the strongest animal in the ecosystem, right? And as human beings, we're considered the apex predator, but only because like smaller animals can't feed on us because of weapons and stuff, right? The lion does not feel guilty when it kills a gazelle, right? You do not feel guilty when you squash a fly. And I think that means something. I just think that really means something.
Original Carrie is clearly not in control. She's catatonic. Whatever part of her is capable of making decisions is shut down, and she's acting on pure instinct. Remake Carrie is not as in control as Andrew is, but she both is and isn't in control in a way that's really to the film's detriment. When the original Carrie causes Chris and Billy's car crash, it's sort of cathartic in a fuck around and find out kind of way. There's a real sense of comeuppance to it, but in the remake it's who am I meant to be rooting for? What's happening here? I'm really not saying all this just to be mean to the director or the actors. I really do think they did the best they could. It's just that, as I mentioned earlier, I don't think a remake of Carrie, especially one that makes the choices this one does, was ever going to work. You can make a version of Carrie where she learns to use her power, but that movie is not Carrie. That movie is Teeth. Surprise! This video is about teeth all along. You've fallen into my trap. My trap of listening to me talk about teeth. I tried to think of the most algorithm-friendly way to describe teeth, but a major theme of teeth is how self-censorship is a harmful practice that is encouraged by powerful groups with the purpose of maintaining unjust hierarchies. In this case, by making young people afraid of their own bodies and their own potential for pleasure, so, yeah. It's the Vagina Dentata movie. Dawn seeks refuge from what she sees as an aggressively hypersexual culture at her local abstinence club, where she's something of a legend. She believes in purity and vows to abstain until she's married, but when she is assaulted by Toby, whom she meets at the Purity Club, she is forced to reckon with the safety she thought she could forge and how it relied on everyone being equally dedicated to following a set of rules that clearly not everyone is equally dedicated to following. Also, she has teeth in her vagina and finds out by biting his dick off. Yeah, I know I said that whole thing about not being algorithm friendly, but I am going to censor the gore because that might be the difference between my videos being suppressed and my channel being suplexed directly into hell. Also, my mum watches these, so it's important that while Dawn, like Carrie, is oppressed by religion, they have very different relationships with it. Carrie is raised by an overbearing religious fanatic, but Dawn's parents think it's kind of weird that she's joined a purity club.
Things were a little different when we were growing up.
Religion is something Dawn chose to pursue because she thought it would keep her safe. The Purity Club is somewhere she can proudly declare that she will only have sex under the circumstances that she chooses. But this choice is an illusion. I think it's fascinating how Teeth presents the Purity Club as appealing, even if that appeal is a facade. You can see how Dawn would think that everyone her age is obsessed with sex, and how she might not understand why she doesn't want this thing that everyone seems really invested in her wanting, but she doesn't have the context to understand that probably the reason she doesn't want it is that she's living under constant threat and frequent incestuous advances from her stepbrother. If she's afraid that it's not enough for her to say no, the appeal of having an all-powerful deity to back her up when she says no is pretty obvious. Throughout the film, the men who hurt Dawn are extensions of environments that disempower her. Every day she enters spaces that disguise oppression with banality. The school, the church, the doctor's office. These are deeply boring spaces that nonetheless are built on and perpetuate a violent patriarchal order. Under the unforgiving fluorescent lights of the world's most drab classroom, Dawn sits through a sex ed lesson delivered by a teacher who can't even bring himself to use anatomically correct terminology.
Sticker. What's it hiding? The state school board has rightly ordered it be concealed. A detailed diagram of the vulva. Ooh,
In another atrociously lit building, a condescending gynecologist uses the fact that Dawn has clearly never had a pelvic exam as cover to assault her. And of course, the church, where Dawn thought she would be safe, but where she is certain that she will be held responsible for Toby's actions, looks like complete shit. By the way, when I say these buildings are badly lit, I mean that as a compliment. It was the correct stylistic choice to make these buildings look awful. These aren't the kind of locations you expect horror to come from. This isn't a castle on top of a hill, this isn't a crumbling estate or a mad scientist lab. You're not looking at these buildings and thinking Dawn is definitely going to get murdered there. You're not looking at Toby and thinking he's definitely the villain. He's friendly, he seems sweet, but his enthusiasm for abstinent women shouldn't be confused with respect for Dawn's autonomy. Really, it's an expression of his belief that women's bodies are for him. Dawn describes her virginity as a gift to be unwrapped on her wedding night, so from Toby's perspective, he's just unwrapping that gift early. These spaces are boring, banal, ordinary, but they are horrifying in their banality. They're not places you would even look at twice, but they're places where Dawn is taught to submit to and participate in her own oppression. The horror of the film is, at first glance, Dawn and her teeth, but the more Dawn learns about herself, the more she learns to express her desires and her boundaries, the more the film reveals that the threat was the environment she lived in. The real teeth were the friends we made along the way. Visually, the first attack scene is separate from these banal environments. Dawn goes from these washed out spaces to a forest full of vibrant greens and blues. It looks like the horror comes from somewhere else, somewhere separate to Dawn's life, like the monster exists to punish her for leaving the safety of the suburbs. But the second attack is in one of the more boring places. The truth is that the horror isn't separate from these boring places, it's where it comes from. Also, you may have noticed that I've been calling these scenes attacks in a vague way. That's on purpose. This is a film about a castrating female monster, so as much as they are scenes where Dawn is attacked, they're also scenes where Dawn attacks. At first in retaliation, but later on purpose. When Dawn learns about the vagina dentata myth, it convinces her that she is a monster who needs to be defeated by a hero, but her journey teaches her that she is a monster who is constantly under attack by would-be heroes. The film is, textually, engaging with a very old mythology, but through that it's also engaging with the history of horror cinema and women's place in it. I'm comparing this film to Carrie, but Teeth is comparing itself to some earlier horror films. When Dawn sees a few seconds of the Black Scorpion, she's horrified. The scorpion puppet haunts her nightmares and gets tangled up in what she thinks of her body. Later, when she catches a few seconds of the Gorgon, the monster is still connected to what she thinks of herself, but this time she likes the comparison. She looks at the monstrous Gorgon and sees a woman defending herself, just like she's learned how to do. Teeth is a story about learning how to stop tolerating the intolerable. Dawn begins the movie thinking about herself pretty much how Carrie's mother thought of Carrie, and her mutation makes her think she's a full-on monster. But in learning to control her teeth and understanding the system that has been victimizing her, Dawn goes from thinking of herself as a monster to recognizing the real monsters in her life, and biting their dicks off. Hello everyone who stuck around until the end. Like I said I would, I will tell you the two things I really liked about the Carrie remake, and the one thing I really didn't. This is kind of off topic, and it kind of derailed the flow to put them in the body of the video, but I didn't want to not put them in at all, so here they are. I thought the first scene, where they're in PE and Carrie's being bullied, is done so well. The original handles it fine, it's all it needs to be, but this version really takes Carrie on a journey. Chloe Grace Moretz gives a fantastic performance in this bit. You're watching her on this journey as she realizes that, like, oh, Chris and Sue are laughing. She thinks maybe this is okay, maybe this is her in, maybe this is the moment that brings her closer to her classmates, but no. It is a bonding moment, but not for her. The other bit I liked is this scene where everyone's getting ready for the prom. The original had a scene that I also really like, where the boys are arguing, alternating between hyping each other up and teasing, but then there's this fast forward that just really annoys me.
Tuxedo. I don't have a tuxedo body.
Ruffles, you always gotta make a joke, right? No, I just don't like ruffles.
Like, no, they have tuxedos here for you.
Come on, Brian, let the lads bond. In the remake, the scene in its entirety is faster, but it also has a lot more energy. It's this montage set to Diane Young by Vampire Weekend, and it's this fun moment of teenage bonding, but there's also the tragic irony where everyone in this scene is dying young. Do you get it? It's a pun. Anyway, it cuts straight to Carrie getting ready alone, and it goes from this high-energy montage to one girl alone in her room, and it's this amazing contrast that really emphasizes how lonely Carrie is. Just genuinely some fantastic filmmaking. So here's the thing I hated. I've seen this in a few different, movies, TV shows, whatever, but there'll be a female character whose partner dies, and then they have this reveal where it's like, oh, don't worry, she's pregnant. Like it's a consolation prize.
It's a girl. What?
I'm always annoyed by that in a general sense. Raising a child is a difficult and time-consuming and physically and emotionally taxing thing to do, and I just can't imagine doing that while grieving the death of the person you were planning to do that with. Isn't that pretty much what the Babadook is about as well? Do you want a Babadook? Because this is how you get Babadooks. Now, the reason I think it's particularly awful here is because not only did Sue's boyfriend die, but she's just witnessed a mass murder, and on top of that trauma, she gets to be an unwed teenage mother. I really think we're meant to read this as her happy ending, unless you watch what I'm pretty sure is just the director's cut, which reveals that, nah, this sucks. Also, I don't like that Carrie chose to spare Sue because she was pregnant. In the original, Sue just barely escaped, and part of the horror is that she could have just as easily been trapped in the gym and killed. It's also related to the larger failing, the agency thing. The fact that Carrie chose to let Sue live implies that she could have spared way more people, but this is a particularly mean-spirited part of it, because Carrie gets enough agency to learn how to use her telekinetic abilities, but the same narrative denies Sue agency in forcing her to go through a pregnancy that makes her life worse. Like, it still has that tragic irony that because Sue chooses to help Carrie, she loses everyone she loves, and the final scene, which is a riff on the original, and again, I'm pretty sure is just in the director's cut, shows that Sue has the one thing that Carrie never had, which is a mother who loves her, but, like, you're still kicking her while she's down. And thank you everyone who watched until the end. Like and subscribe, do the YouTube things, engage with the platform. I sound so sarcastic, I'm sorry, I have permanent sarcasm voice, but I really do appreciate that you're here. If you want to support me, I have a Patreon where you can do that, like these people here. Until next time, stay safe, do your best not to murder everyone at your school, and say hi to your pets for me.